So I'm going to hit record. And for those of you who aren't here or who can't be here today, welcome to our third rendition of Practicum for the fall semester of 2023. And it is this class where when I teach Practicum, go over a comp preview. And so I know several of you are going to sit for comps this fall. First step, if you plan to sit for comps this fall and you have not contacted Melissa Brown, do that today. Do that as soon as you can, because she needs to make preparations for you to sit for the exam. The exam will be held October the 5th from 1 to 5 p.m. in Alva. And so if something, so I'll just say try to be there, because it's supposed to be a standardized test, where everybody experiences the same thing. So what we try to do is we try to simulate the National Counselor exam. And so once you graduate, you will need to pass 2 exams. And I just got an email this morning from a recent graduate who said she just passed her O'Leary and her NCE, and she's ready to go forward with her licensure. So it's exciting. I've got 3 folks out there like that from this latest graduating class. I think there's more, but at least 3 that I'm aware of this week, moving forward in their journey, becoming counselors, licensed counselors. So you have to pass an Oklahoma Laws and Ethics and Regulations exam, OLERE, O'Leary. We're not going to worry too much about that. There may be a handful of questions on this exam that go over the O'Leary. However, the bigger portion, the bigger part, and those would be under the ethics section, but the bigger concern for this class would be to prep you for the 8 sections that it will be necessary to pass for the National Counselor exam, the NCE. So you have to pass the O'Leary, and then this is after you graduate, and then you have to pass the NCE. After you pass those 2 steps in Oklahoma, you can get under supervision for licensure. And then it takes 3,000 hours to get an LPC. Now, LADC is a little different. LADC, it only requires 2,000 hours of time. You can accrue hours before you achieve your master's. So there are all kinds of things that are different with the LADC. If you are LADC, this is an interesting conundrum. If you are LADC only, I need you to contact me. If you're LADC only, which means you're just doing the 54-hour program. And the reason being is because you would need a qualitatively different test than the folks that we're trying to prep for the NCE. So the way that it has been changed in the past has been with the essay. However, as I mentioned last week, the essay is going to be optional for this class and the class graduating in the spring. What we decided to do is we've decided to transition over to, instead of a 100-question multiple choice, and it shouldn't be paper this fall. You should get a chance to sit at a computer and take it, because that's what you'll be doing for the NCE too. But it's we're transitioning to a 200-question multiple choice exam to more closely resemble the NCE, because that's what the NCE is. It's 200 multiple choice questions, A through E. You have 5 options, and there are 8 core areas that students need to study for. And so we try to mimic, we try to correspond and correlate very closely with what they're trying to do there. That said, this class, you have an option. You can take what we've done over the past 7 years since I've been here. You can take the 100-question multiple choice test, and also have an essay portion where you respond to a vignette. In that vignette, you would apply your theory. There are typically 9 or 10 questions. They're pretty standardized. If you're choosing to do that, I'll give you an idea of what those questions will be. I won't give you every question, but the thing is that it's okay to give away some of the questions because you'll have a unique vignette to respond to, a unique case study that you'll be applying your knowledge to. Before I go forward, I'd like, because I did announce this last week, who here would like to do the new format with all 200 questions? Raise your hand if you'd like to do that. Okay. Raise your hand if you'd like to do the 100 question multiple choice and essay, the half and half. I have 3 of 5.
Me.
All right.
I'm raising
I've got two abstentions. I don't know. Dahlia, what were you gonna say?
I'm raising my hand for the vignette and the questions.
So I've got 4 of 5, and Jolisa an abstention. Jolisa, what are your thoughts?
I guess the questions in the vignette.
Okay. Fair enough. That should be fine. So, and that works well because the test is already kind of laid out that way. In that case, without further ado, and so if you're watching this video, you didn't get a chance to sit in on this live because there are several others of you this affects, at least 3. So if you want to take the 200 question test, you need to email me as soon as you get this so I can collaborate with Melissa Brown and get that 200 question test going for you. So the way this will work, then for those of you that are doing the split test, you will arrive in Alva and you will be assigned a computer workstation to work at, and you will sit and take the I believe we'll do the multiple choice question test first, and you'll have, well, so this is an interesting situation. So you have 4 total hours to complete both sections. Typically people take less than 2 hours to get, so like let's say you did 2 hours for a 100 question test, 2 hours for the essay. In my experience, people tend to take about an hour and a half for the 100 question test, maybe a little less, maybe like an hour and 20 minutes. And then they come into the essay, and that's where they spend a majority of their time is responding to this vignette and answering those 10 questions. I had a student finish the 100 question test in 38 minutes, one sitting. I did not do well. Take your time, think through. Obviously, don't double guess yourself too often, but try to reason through. Our multiple choice test should be a little bit easier than the NCE. We're not trying to just run you into the ground. Instead of 5 options, A through E, we have 4. There are 4 options on the multiple choice, A through D, and so. If you just circle one, you have a 25% chance of getting it right versus 20% on the, on the standardized test. There are 8 core areas. Let's go over some of those to think about this. If you go to your plan of study, I'm going to help you kind of get some things together here. Let me pull one up. Hopefully. My computer's going really slowly. Bear with me. Probably I've got too many screens up. And Jolisa, there's your plan of study. Care if I share yours? I don't want to do anything that. In fact, well,
Sure.
I'm recording this, so I hate to just, because I'll probably. So I appreciate your willingness to do that, but I'll wait. Not that there's anything bad on there. It's just I feel weird about putting somebody's private stuff out, especially if I record it. If this wasn't like, if this was just live and like water under the bridge, and I wouldn't care as much. But golly, hold on. Let me find it in a folder. Then I did a search, and I'm getting like everybody's stuff. I just want the generic stuff. Well, okay, fine. You can find these if you haven't. I'll go the old school way. Okay, I gotta get that down. Sorry, I've got all kind of confidential information going on here. So I need to get rid of that. I need to get rid of that. Get rid of that. Too many windows open. If I were editing this, I would cut out the last 2 minutes of class. Okay, so let's go to Are you all seeing like the Northwestern homepage? Is that what you're getting here? Okay, excellent. Okay, so you're going to log into Blackboard, or you're going to consult your plan of study. Too much to think about for my computer today. Okay, so you each should have access to something called MCP Student. So if you click here and you go under Forms and you see LPC Plan of Study, I'm just going to choose that one. If you're LADC, it's very close to the same. Okay, and at long last, without further ado, took like 7 minutes to get here. Okay, what your test is going to be comprised of will be content from these classes. And so think about human growth and development. Think about abnormal behavior. Think about assessment, stats for assessment. Think about your theories. Think about, excuse me. And think about your strats and techniques class, ethics, research, multicultural, group, career, and there's a section on professional orientation. It has to do with supervise. Supervise really is a lot of overlap with individual, but there's some general practice questions in there under professional orientation. That's it. Here are your core areas. So what I would recommend is for studying, because there have been all kinds of strategies for this, and I've seen them now for 7 years. And there are some strategies that are effective and others that just are honestly, they're counter-effective. So and I just looked over before our class in the past couple of days, because I was thinking about our review, and I looked over the last several classes who've taken this, and I can safely say that the folks who honestly went back, found their textbooks, found where, you know, they had PowerPoints, what they were given in class, and they studied those examples, those things that they used to learn while they were going through the program. You know, they might make from memory, they might, okay, so let's think about human growth and development. Let's think about Erickson. All right, so I know I've got 8 stages, and so I might make an acronym in my mind, or a, you know, a mnemonic: trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame and doubt. You know, just you go through and you start trying to do those things from memory. You know, trying to sketch see if you can recall those. To make, you know, I really like handwritten stuff because it has to flow through you. Even though I've moved into like the digital age and I type, there's something more personal about you using your own handwriting to write down information and then study from. So if you took notes during classes using your, you know, using a notebook or whatever, go back and study those notes. If you didn't, I would suggest even creating some. I'd suggest going through really personalizing this to you. Where people have not done well in their study strategies, I had a class, oh my goodness, this was our lowest average of any class, and there were a bunch of people that did this. They all decided that they were going to get the purple book from Rosenthal, which is fantastic. Howard has a lot of good information. I mean, it's everything under the sun. And practice, you know, practice tests, all those things. The issue there is that they overwhelm themselves with all of Rosenthal's information. What I would expect from you is to know some information really super well. You know, things that, you know, maybe associated with Carl Rogers, maybe B.F. Skinner, maybe Freud, maybe Beck, maybe Ellis. You know, the big, you know, I'm thinking individual theories now. Adler, Jung, I guess you could pronounce it that way. No, really, the heart, the biggest portions of what they're doing, rather than getting lost in the weeds. The class that got lost in the weeds felt like they needed to know every idiosyncratic detail to everything. And then they got to doubting themselves, and then when it came to sitting for the exam, they didn't do well. They did horribly, comparatively speaking, to the other classes. So if you have a photographic memory and you're a complete, like, obsessed person with getting everything right in counseling, okay, go get the purple book. Go dive in 100%, make that happen. Maybe that's you, but it's been my experience that most times people do best when they refresh the synapses they've already kind of made, going through the 2 years of the program they've already paid for, rather than going and buying a new book and all these new resources. You already put in the time and the money. Go back and look at what you did with your time and your money, and put it to use here. So if you take something from today, from what we talk about, this would be, to me, the biggest part of it, is if you go and you start taking these practice tests and start doing all of these flashcards and all these different strategies. It's been my experience that starts to affect a person's confidence, and they feel like they know nothing. So get to know the things that you know really well. Go back, refresh it. This will take some time. This isn't something that you can just the night before start cramming for. You know, this is a comprehensive exam. So from like this date going forward about a month, pick some times. Pick maybe an hour a night, maybe 30 minutes a night, something that, and maybe that 30, maybe the first 30 minutes this first week after this class, maybe what you do is I'm just getting my materials. I'm just getting my stuff from ethics. I'm downloading my stuff from multicultural. I'm downloading my stuff from career ed. I'm downloading my stuff from group. I'm getting my books. I'm getting my resources together. And then you start to section those things off. I'm getting my stuff from stats for assessment. And then from there, start choosing a subject maybe per week or every couple of days, switch subjects and do a different one. But don't get lost in the weeds. Know the main stuff really well. What about this theorist named Johnson in 2007 who said this? So what? Is that somebody that that you're really, okay, this is a primary theorist. No, it's not. So the folks that have struggled have gotten lost in little things like that. I'm going to pause there because I've spoken for quite a while. What are your thoughts so far?
Will we be able to get access to information and class stuff for teachers that are not here anymore?
Ooh. Oh man. Okay, that's tough because by right that information was theirs. If I would say if they close their Blackboard shell, it's probably not a good thing. If in that case, if you don't have a lot of information, I would reach out to classmates. I'd reach out to your cohort members here. I'll give you some kind of core areas today to think about, studying for. But, textbooks, PowerPoints, notes, those things are important. What classes are you thinking about, Ryan?
The stuff that like Ms. Miller was here for, so individual theories, stuff like that.
Okay. So individual is if you guys have oh my gosh, I'm gonna date myself. So I have the 5th edition of Corey. I don't know if he's on like the 20th edition now or something like that. But the Corey and Corey books, those are solid. Those are really good resources. So I had to study for a comprehensive exam for my own PhD because I had to take one at the end of my program. You know what I used? A 20-year-old book, and it worked because I still have all my highlighted pages. I still have all my things, as I was going through the theories. That's one of the things is this, y'all know that psychology is created by old white dudes, and it's pretty much, they're old and in the grave, and their stuff, their words are all here. So it doesn't change a whole lot. I mean, I guess they're, if you look at some of the newer theories, like solution focused is a little bit newer, but it's still in here. De Shazzer and they might add something to it here and there. Or narrative therapy, Epstein and White. That's a newer one, but it's still it's still here. Like that individual class she taught, Ron, I'd really go back and get your textbook. That's something that even on like your NCE, I think Corey helped write the NCE. So I mean, you're looking at one of the folks that is like a renowned expert in the field. So that's a really good resource. If you don't have access to a copy, go talk to Misty Klein, maybe Bailey Trammell there in Alva. Maybe we have an extra copy floating around. But that's honestly that I used my notes in this, and it was good. Good question. Other questions?
Ryan, all of the stuff from individuals still on Blackboard.
Oh, I didn't look. I was just asking just to have that out there.
Yeah, if it's a closed class, I think this is good for everybody. I think that's a good question. Meaning Blackboard has kind of done away with it. reach out, see if there's a text or something else, but also reach out to your peers probably first, see if they have something or a resource that y'all can share. That's another, I'll jump into another idea from that. So I remember going through this myself and having study groups. And what I found from the study groups is people would tend to chat a lot and just kind of talk shop and not really study. I mean, sometimes we do the flashcards and things, but after my first or second study group, I was like, I'm good. No, I'm okay with the study because I wasn't getting any because you're going to be taking the test by yourself. You're not going to be able to. Hey, Abby, what do you think about what do you think about question 12? You're not be able to do that on the when you're sitting for it. So what I would suggest is maybe getting together once or twice as a group, and if you want, but then really taking the time to. Okay, I've got to know this myself because I'm the person on the computer. Nobody else is there with me. And I think that also affected that group that used the Rosenthal book instead of using their school resources. I think that they also did a lot of that. I think there was more than one strike against that crew. Other questions before I move on? No? Okay. Let me just kind of dive in to the content areas and just start thinking about, so this is an older version. So sometimes we recycle questions. Sometimes we add new ones. No, we always add new ones, but sometimes we recycle some old ones. Each exam is a little bit different than the one before it. And so just because I'm going in this order doesn't mean it's going to be in this order on or all the topics. You might have so please know this review is not going to cover all the topics. We spent 2 years doing this program, so I don't have the time in an hour to go over every topic, but I'm going to try to give you some ideas about like, okay, what it is. So if you're taking notes, this would be a good time to get a pen out or, jot a little Google document down. Let's talk a little bit about statistics. And I want to know, first of all, so think about your statistics for assessment class. First of all, what are some bigger themes that you assume, okay, yeah, we covered this a lot. We're probably going to talk about something like this. What would you assume is going to be, based on your experience in class, some things that, yeah, we're going to see this on a test? Sorry, go ahead.
Distributions, Z-scores, T-scores, mean, median, mode, all of those, I would say, the big things.
Yes. T-scores. Standard deviation. Mean, median, mode. Really some basic stuff here. Think about also sometimes these questions, because the questions on the NCE aren't just necessarily, hey, what is it? It's an application question. So like, what percentage of the population might be between -1 and +1 Z-score? Like what, so obviously if you're kind of thinking out, like what did he just say? So if you recall, Z-scores, what did I just draw here? If we're thinking about Z-scores.
A normal distribution.
A normal distribution. And what do you think these lines roughly represent?
The Z-scores.
Yeah. Here's a Z-score of 0. Here's a z-score of +1. Here's a z-score of -1. And so if you want to, you'll have you'll have like some blank sheets of paper. If you want to, you'll have to turn them in at the end, but if you want to jot down some notes, like especially during these stat questions where I am not an abstract thinker when it comes to numbers. If I am able to draw it out like this, I'm cool. But if I'm just in my head, I'm all over the place. So my question was, what percentage of the population might you expect between -1 +1 z-score? You
I
remember?
want to say it's like 95 something.
So I draw these things out. So you remember there's roughly about 2% in the tails, right? Roughly 2%. You remember the percent out here?
99. Or like, or you want more specific?
I'm wanting in between these, like,
The ones are like 68 point something, and then I think twos are 95 point something.
oh, Ryan got the question. It's 68 point something. So roughly 68% is here, right? So 34% of, within that standard deviation above, 34% within that standard deviation below. And then you got a 14% between -1 and -2, 14%. So remember, memorizing these kind of diagrams, that were kind of key in that class can help you on several. So there might be 3 or 4 questions like this. And that have to do with z-scores or even t-scores. So, because t-score is supposed to resemble these, right? So important information there. Let's see here. Things like, distribution shape. Like the distributions have different shapes. Like what were some different shapes you can think of? Like if I had a distribution that looked like that, or a distribution that looked like this. What's
Is it
that?
like positive or negatively?
Negatively what?
Skewed.
Skewed, yeah. And I would say this one's negative and this one's positive. I'd have to go back and review that myself. Let's see here. But yeah, this is normal, or this is my drawing is horrible with this mouse. This is roughly normal, but these are definitely skewed. Go back and think about which one is positive, which one is negative. Let's see here. What else? Like correlations. Correlation. So if you were thinking about correlations and you had a correlation of R equals -0.43. What does that number tell you? Let's say it's in relation to ice cream sales and violent crime. Now let's say ice cream and I don't know, what's a good one? And coat sales, winter coat sales. Why would that number mean anything when you're thinking about a relationship between ice cream and winter coat sales?
It's correlation.
It's a correlation. True. What type of correlation? Because it's negative.
weak correlation.
Not quite, not quite. I would say a weak correlation would be something more like negative 0.10. So the closer that you get to positive or negative 1, those are going to be strong correlations. So if I had a correlation of 0.9 or negative 0.9, that's going to be super strong. However, this so as ice cream sales go up, what happens to winter coat sales? Because it's a negative correlation.
They go down.
Yeah, yeah. They have nothing to do with each other, right? I mean, they're related, but just because people are buying ice cream, does that mean they feel they're full of milk products? They don't want to buy winter coats. Is that a causation? No. What might be the better explanation?
It's more hot.
It's summertime, right? That's why they're buying ice cream. Why would I want to buy a coat when it's summertime? Unless it's on sale. Maybe it's Amazon Prime Day. But maybe that's why you also have, would this be considered a weak, moderate, or strong? Because you hinted at the real key here, Ryan. Would this be a weak, moderate, or strong correlation, this 0.43, negative 0.43?
I guess more moderate then.
Yeah, I'd argue that's pretty moderate. There's something there, but it's not like it's 90% of the time when people are buying ice cream, they're not buying winter coats or something like that. I know it's a ridiculous correlation, but I wanted it to be. So, correlations, the reason I'm going into the weeds a little bit on this is because you need to apply some of these really basic concepts, be able to work with them, in the context of a question. Okay. Okay, so what are think about some concepts from assessment. So we talked about stats. The other part of that, you had a full assessment class where you had to deliver them, but you also in that stats for assessment class should have talked about some key fundamental assumptions for assessments and types. What would be some different types of assessments? What is the MMPI? I'm sorry, it didn't come through.
Are you asking like what it's the name of it or what it does?
Both, if it's okay.
Minnesota multiphasic inventory?
Personality inventory, yeah. Personality inventory. What else? So what's the difference between an achievement test and an aptitude test?
Different levels of mastery?
For achievement, yes. Aptitude would be more along the lines of what? So think about the word aptitude. Somebody is apt to do this.
That's more like what you are leaning towards.
It's more
or
of a
something that you are more likely to do. That's not a more mastery thing. That's just a like strengths and weaknesses type thing.
Here's a good analogy for that. Aptitude is like IQ. Aptitude is like somebody has, because your IQ, and there are all kinds of faults with IQ tests, but IQ in a nutshell is supposed to mean like somebody who's 5, they have this intelligent quotient. When they're 25, they should have a similar aptitude because they have this IQ supposed to follow you. Versus somebody can read at a kindergarten level when they're 5 versus a 12th grade level when they're 21, or so The achievement test would be like the ability to read and manipulate language, the language test. The aptitude test would be the IQ, because it's supposed to be somebody is apt, somebody has this ability. There are problems with that type of aptitude test, but that's in essence achievement versus aptitude test. An aptitude test would also be like an ACT, an SAT, a GRE. You know, one of these entrance exams. Excuse me. What's the difference between reliability and validity? Better know it, right? What is it?
Accuracy versus consistency.
Which one's accuracy?
Validity.
Correct. Consistency is reliability, repeatability. Know that there are different kinds. There are different kinds of reliability. There are different kinds of validity. Please go through and refamiliarize yourself with that. If a person had a percentile rank on a test, you know, be able to kind of interpret that. Be able to recognize, you know, I went over MMPI, Rorschach, thematic apperception test, sentence, you know, be able to apply this knowledge a little bit. You know, what type of tests do what? Okay, I think I've probably given you enough of that. So really, and no, that's not exhaustive. Just know it's going to be those kind of things that are tested. And oftentimes in the questions, it's you applying that knowledge. Okay, let's think about our theories now. What theories might you want to study, and what are the names of the folks associated with those theories? Psychodynamic is,
Freud.
yeah, and the stages are
Pluralism.
Am I right? Is that still a thing? My ancient memory? Okay. Who else besides Freud? Might think of like somebody like was Jung interested in? He's still working with the unconscious. We're thinking a lot about dreams. He really termed collective unconscious. Gosh, I have a friend who's a Jungian who kicked me in the shin right now. So we don't usually cover Jung that much. People who like Jung really get into Jung. Animus, those concepts. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there because I don't want to lead you down a wrong tube. Excuse me. Adler. Some birth order stuff, right? Socialization. Adler's really big on and this comes from the DSM-1. Complexes, right? Inferiority complex. Others? And if I'm wrong, hey, hey, please correct me. If you go back in your notes and you see that Randolph said this, hey, and I'm not right. Hey, it's been a while since I studied these gangs, so I'm not gonna be infallible. Please don't use the use the authority. All right, which is your textbook. Use your textbook. Use your notes. Who else? Who else might we think about? I usually just go with the really big theorists here. Like, what are some? Okay, what's Skinner associated with?
Behavior.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I asked that one. I asked that question one time. In fact, it was the group that had the low average. I asked that amongst that group, and there were crickets, and I wasn't going to give it to them. I like sat here. I was doing the uncomfortable silence thing, and they couldn't come up with it. That was post COVID. I think that was post COVID. So anyway, welcome to class, Sandra. Or yeah, there's Sandra and Megan. Hi. Sorry if you're in the waiting room for a little while. We're going over review for the exam. I am recording, so do not freak out that you missed probably 35 minutes of the preview. So what I would recommend is when I post this, if I don't post it, you blow my email up until I do. Or would recommend going back and watching. So there are a lot of things I'm not going to recover, but we're kind of in the middle of the meat and potatoes of what to study on the multiple choice exam. And I'm not saying everything. I'm just saying some things that these would likely be concepts that would be on this exam and also the NCE. So what kind of concepts under Skinner might we think of and associate with behaviorism?
Operant conditioning.
Thank you. The Skinner box, operant conditioning. Know the difference between positive, negative reinforcement. And please do not get confused with punishment. That was not Skinner's big thing there. It's the reinforcement. I might play off of this one a little bit because he's close to Skinner, but goes a little different direction. Albert Bandura, what's Bandura's theory?
I can't remember.
Oh, somebody said it. What was it?
Social learning.
Oh, $32,000 bonus points. Yes.
That's my theory.
Social learning. Oh, well, okay. Well, then you should know it, right? Social
Yeah.
learning. So I love social learning when I was working with adolescents, because adolescents are all about navigating that social environment. Social learning theory, vicarious learning, right? Was, had those experiments about aggression and the Bobo doll. If I could spell aggression right with 2 G's. Yeah. Okay, good. But I put Bender under Skinner because it's a little bit of an offshoot. What other kind of theorists might be here?
Rogers.
Yep, thank you. So if you think of Carl Rogers, what I want you to go back and think of is strategies and techniques. The unconditional, obviously positive regard. And think about the 6 necessary and sufficient conditions. I'm not going to go over those. Yeah, very good. If you're thinking of Rogers, kind of think of your micro skills. It's not exactly a one-to-one. I mean, we have you do some other things with micro skills, but Rogers is a lot of your in-session micro skills. You know, the reflections. Really not more. Rogers really didn't ask many questions. Rogers is all about I'm being present for you. What else?
Ellis.
Yep. Ellis, that's a good one to know. Okay, so this is a, as you're thinking about these, and as you're studying this section, I took a poll earlier, and everybody that was here early said they're going to do the combined test. They're going to do the 100 multiple choice and also the essay. And so I'm going to segue a bit into the essay, because what theory you choose or you most closely align with, you better know that thing inside and out. You better, regardless of whether you're practicing it in your videos, in your practicum site, or how much you've used it to date, because you're going to have a vignette, you're going to have a case scenario, and you're going to apply that theory of your choice. And I would recommend at this point really making it one, maybe leaning into barely another. So for instance, like, okay, I'll give it away. So take your mind off of the multiple choice for a minute and move into this vignette that you're going to do. If you're starting a relationship, a counseling relationship with a client, what perspective, what theory, what techniques do you rely upon primarily your first few sessions?
Humanistic.
Thank you. Humanistic, Rogers. Yes. Micro skills. we just went, Ryan Willingham just mentioned it. So yeah, it's okay to lean into that for a minute, right? Because it doesn't mean you're going to, now there are a couple of you that really are, person-centered. And I think Alex is, but Alex is going to work with kids. And then Megan, were you going to be person-centered too? I think that you've lined into that quite a bit. So know your theory, know your approach really well and what it does, and be able to apply that in a session. So be able to show me, like you on your transcripts for your videos where you're going into detail, I'm reflecting feeling here because I want to validate the client, totally empathize with the client, amplify their feelings to let them go into a deeper space. You need to really go into some detail on what you're doing intentionally. So if you're choosing to do the essay, lean into those recordings and those transcripts that you've produced, only go into a lot of detail, whether it's like, assume that your committee members are complete novices to the field and know nothing about counseling when you're writing your essay. And you're just describing in intricate detail, this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm sitting with silence, because I want to give the client space to think about and really deeply process and get into their emotions, rather than me throwing another question at them and them kind of going back into their cerebral cortex and losing that moment. So I'm going into that example for, Rogers. Each one of you can use that. But if you use something more, let's say you use something like CBT. Let's say you use Ellis. This is why I started to jump off into this. What approach does Ellis use? Largely.
REBT.
REBT, Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy. What components are in REBT?
The ABC components: antecedent, behavioral, and consequence.
Yeah. You got ABC.
And then I feel like there's a D, but I can't remember what the D was.
I go DE. You can even go to F. I don't think that, I think the D and E are an Ellis thing. I think F is more of a Randolph thing. But the ABC, activating event, behavior, excuse me, the belief, wow. Don't, it's blah. I've had so many people get that wrong. I inherited that and soaked in. Your belief and the behavioral consequence. And then there's a place where the D comes in, and the D, I'm going to go over here. You don't dispute the event, you don't dispute the consequence, you dispute the belief, right? Which leads to a new effect. And I would, the F for me is new feeling, which you don't have to. All right, so let me draw something here. Stop. So the ABC model, the activating event, the internal belief, the behavioral or consequence of the belief. You dispute the irrational belief, and that's the big thing for Ellis. These are irrational. And Ellis, if you've ever watched those videos, Ellis is very directive. Ellis isn't like just a. So if you were going to try to do Rogers together with Ellis, there's a little bit of a disconnect because Ellis becomes somewhat of an expert on the irrational versus irrational beliefs. Rogers is not about determining anything for the client. Rogers is there to support the client. But yeah, so the shoulds, the musts, these kind of musts. I think you use the term masturbation, musts. Thinking about these absolute. Somebody starts talking in absolutes that can discover, you can discover some of these irrational beliefs. Well, I must do good on this test, or I'm just a failure. But you need to go into really quite a bit of detail, and you need to know Ellis's background. So think if you're going to choose Ellis, you're going to use that one for your. So you need to know how Ellis formulated the theory. The assumptions, is it more of a directive approach from the therapist? Is it more of a passive approach from the therapist like Rogers? What are the expectations of the client in the session? What are the expectations of the therapist in the session? What are some examples of what it looks like for the therapist in the session? Really, really, really know the weaknesses of your theory. There will be 2 or maybe even 3 questions where you need to talk about situations where your theory doesn't work. And no theory is perfect. None of these, not one. So you need to have a backup plan for when it falls through. And so, for instance, I'll give one away here. What if you have a person who is addicted to cocaine coming in talking to somebody who uses a Rogerian or person-centered perspective? And they like their cocaine use. They don't see any problems with it.
You might not be able to get anywhere.
Or somebody who likes their alcohol, or somebody who likes their gambling. Or on situations, maybe somebody who's been through trauma. There is something really good about using a person-centered Rogerian approach with somebody who's been through trauma. But one of the symptoms of trauma is inability to recall certain events around the trauma, and an unwillingness to want to recall events around the trauma. An active avoidance of any reminder of the trauma. So be aware, and so like for instance, let's go take this one as well, the one that we just talked about with Ellis. Ellis is the one largely telling the client what's rational or irrational. What's the problem with that?
They're kind of being the professional of another person's life.
Yeah, they're really acting as an expert, but is this culturally sensitive? I'd argue it's not. I'd argue it's whatever, in Ellis's case, it's a white male psychologist perspective on it. I'm the expert. So if somebody had somebody lived their life through an Eastern philosophy or an Eastern religion or in a different way of life, collectivist culture, this is probably not going to be an appropriate approach. Just telling somebody, well, that's irrational. So there are very clear limitations, which each one. So know your limitations and think about. Don't just assume, oh, it's just this. Don't. So for instance, in that case, don't just take this 2003 textbook and say, oh, it's just this. Think about real application when it's probably going to fall through, because we do want to see that. Most of you in this group are going to do the essay. We want to see that you're really thinking this through, and it'll be, a vignette that will, we haven't picked the vignette yet, but it will be one that has some complexity, and you'll need to think it through. Okay, questions. I didn't give you all of the questions for the vignette, but I did allude to a few. Questions on that before we move back into theory. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
So is the vignette gonna be kind of like the one that we did in supervised?
It'll be very much like the one you did in supervise, except there are a few more questions, and you probably need to do a little bit more, have a little bit more detail. The feedback you received from that midterm is probably pretty good feedback to help you understand what it might be. In fact, since we're into that, let me just. I've got one more of you coming into the room right now. Since we're on this subject, let me go ahead and give you an example of some of the things to think about with the vignette. Excuse me, I'm fighting sinus stuff with my kid. Okay. So these are some bigger questions to think about. Who were the authors or the founders of the theory? What are their major philosophical assumptions? So if you're Rogers, that humanistic, people determine their own fate. They're the experts of their own lives. If it's using kind of for a dichotomy, if it's Ellis, then the counselor is the expert. You're determining you're looking at somebody's irrational beliefs. Irrational beliefs lead to dysfunction. The ABCDE model, the REBT, rationally motive behavioral therapy. You're outlining each one of those things. You're pretending that we're dummies off the street, know nothing about psychology, and you're explaining it to us. Because unless you go into that sort of detail, you don't earn the credit. You have to go into that credit to show us that you know it. Where does dysfunction come from, according to your theory? What does wellness look like, according to your theory? What's the role of the counselor in your theory? How does change happen? How does change occur? What's the role of the client in your theory? What might be some goals of therapy using your theory? Now you'll have to like use the client, but these are some of the bigger questions that are going to be asked. and then what are some techniques? This, I would say, so each question is weighted differently. So there's a more emphasis placed on more questions. This question has the most emphasis on it if you're taking the essay. Provide specific examples of the techniques reflecting your theory using the client, using the vignette. So taking this person, these are the techniques. This is what they look like in session. Don't just label the techniques. Don't just say, oh, I'd use deep breathing or I'd use systematic desensitization. Okay, that's fine. What does that look like? You need to step us through. If you mention that you're going to do that, step us through what that looks like. Because people do not get full credit. People do not get passing credit on that sort of question unless they go into some detail on, no, this is what it looks like if I were doing systematic desensitization for this particular stressor. So yeah, this is anxiety provoking, I know, but this is going to require, so hopefully that's going to challenge you to be on your theory, thinking about your approaches that you'll be using, and then being able to step through, on the spot, outside of you consulting a textbook, okay, this is what it would look like in this case. So I'm telling you, you need to know your theory, your particular theory pretty well. So you can, okay, I'm using narrative therapy. So how would I use narrative therapy to deal with this problem? Now, there are some ways that you could do that, but you could then show, okay, well, we try to externalize the problem. And here's what we would do. I'd have the client create a narrative where the problem is outside of them. Maybe we give the problem a name, and that way it's externalizing the problem. So if it's solution focused, now if you're solution focused, there are a lot of shortcomings, and the case that you're going to get probably has some complexity. So if you're a solution focused therapist, if you are a Rogerian person-centered therapist, you're probably going to need to lean into something a little extra because of the complexity of the case. I don't know what the case is yet, but that's typically been the experience. Okay, so provide examples. That's the biggest question because we want to see it in action. We want to see you apply it. And I'm going to stop there. There are 4 other questions. No, I'll give you one more. And I already alluded to it. Really be able to go into detail on the limitations of your, we want to know where your theory falls short and that you know where your theory falls short. And then what you might do to help in those situations where, okay, I have an unmotivated client that's not responding to what I'm doing or whatever it might be. Okay, questions. That's it. That's the time I'm going to spend on the essay, on the vignette. Those are the questions. Okay, I'm going to go back into the. So I've just, so you know, because I've had people accuse, well, you didn't go into what to expect. I just gave you the 7 questions, basically verbatim, that are going to be on the essay. So you know kind of the depth that you need to go into. Not just kind of, you know that you need to go into some depth.
Isn't there always like an ethical question on the vignette?
There may be, and so there are 3 other questions I didn't ask. That might be one of them. Okay, it can't be just complete. Here it is. Okay, so let's go back into theory. Let's close that up, and then we'll go back into our other 6 sections. So we have quite a bit. We have quite a bit of ground to cover. Some others. So like this was one part of CBT. If you're doing CBT, there's other folks that you need to mention because there are other folks that do CBT. Who might be another?
Beck.
Yeah, yep, Beck. So Beck really is an offshoot where Ellis had the RABT, Beck had cognitive therapy, or CT. And this is really automatic thoughts. Beck did a lot of his work with depressed patients. So, you know, think about self-talk a lot with Beck. Think about the cognitive triad, which is different than the think, feel, do cycle. That's not the same thing. Okay, Beck's cognitive triad is something different. Be sure that you're able to delineate those. If you're using think, feel, do, don't call it Beck's cognitive triad because it's not. That's something different. You know, and if you're using Beck, you know, be able to identify some of these automatic thoughts like catastrophizing. Over-personalizing. I think he uses a different term for that. Overgeneralization. It's always going to be bad. That's just a few. That's just a few. Beck is more that the client is the expert. More collaborative than Ellis. There are just a few of the differences. There are more differences. I'm not going over all. So if you were using SFT, is that Berg and DeShazer? Yeah. I think it's DeShazer and Berg. You know, miracle question. Very goal-oriented. Client is the expert here. Really resembles motivational interviewing. All right. Probably one more. Probably Epstein and White, narrative therapy. Externalizing the problem really is big. There are others. I'm just going over quickly. But if you choose one of these, don't just do what I'm doing here and write a couple things. Get into it. Chew on it a little bit. Know it. Be able to apply it because it will come out. I had one person who failed miserably because they chose a theory of choice like a day or two before the thing. I'm like, how did you expect to do well? I mean, you can't just sit back and be passive here. You need to dig into one of these, okay? And they were like, oh, I don't know. I was like, they had to resit. I mean, they didn't know it. If you spend some time with this, though, it's not impossible. It's just narrative therapy. Maybe a feminist therapy. Know a couple of concepts, but that's pretty much it. I didn't put. Now this is important. Raise your hand if you're doing the. Raise your hand if you're doing the LADC as well, with us. So Abby, anybody else? Okay, Abby, this is important for you. This is for your essay. If you're LADC, your essay is a little bit different. And here's what makes it different. You have to apply the stages of change. It's required. So you have to apply the stages of change. So obviously know what those are. And you also have to apply motivational interviewing at some point along the lines of those stages of change. and adjust your theory to meet the client in their stage of change. Okay, that's really the biggest thing for you. If you're doing LADC, take these notes right here. It will be necessary for you to illustrate to your committee that you can apply these things. That's really the only difference. I mean, you'll have some substance issues to deal with or addiction issues to deal with in your vignette that the others won't. But this is really the big thing that's going to show us, okay, they've learned something from their LADC track. Okay, moving on. Questions there? Anything? If you just joined us, please go back and watch this. I am recording it, and so we covered a lot of territory. Let's jump into some general ethical questions. So, from your ethics classes, what are some things that stand out from your ethics class?
Document everything.
Yeah, I like document everything. What else?
Promote autonomy.
Yeah, so autonomy, there are certain things that you want to promote. So beneficence. Oh my gosh, Kitchener's 5 principles. So no, whether or not you went into this, it got this in your class. Kitchener's 5 principles. I'm on the spot, so I can't get them all. I know autonomy and beneficence. Non-maleficence is one of them. I think fidelity and something else. Those are important. What else? So one of the things that I'm noticing as I'm looking at the questions, you'll be confronted with situations about dual relationships. How do you handle dual relationships? That's a big thing for us in counseling. Most ethical violations occur when ethical boundaries are crossed.
Transference and like counter transference.
Yes, thank you. I just saw right when you said that, there's a question that talks about a difference between transference and counter transference. People always get those confused. What is transference? It's desirable if you're a Freudian. What is transference?
It's when the client picks up on something about you that reminds them of someone else and they kind of emote that.
Triggers. So this is how you tell the difference. Freudians strive for transference because they want you to be reminded that you're like their father or like their mother. They want that to come out. They want transference. Transference is when the client has a response to you. What is countertransference?
The opposite, where you're doing that to the client.
You have the response to the client. So your client reminds you of your aunt who used to beat you with a stick and it's like, so how am I going to get through this? So countertransference is very important to work with as well. Let's see here. So there's some moral principles from the ACA Code of Ethics. Some of these, I think veracity Kitchen, they borrow from Kitchener. Veracity, not veracity. How many hours do you have to get a license in Oklahoma supervision?
3K?
Yeah, 3,000. So some of these ethical questions also correspond with our general practice questions with professional orientation. So what are some things that when you first meet a client that you need to do?
Hmm.
Confidentiality statement and
And there's something else, professional disclosure. What all is part of professional disclosure? It's a lot to that. It could be limits of confidentiality, but it's also,
Like you have to tell them what your degree is, you know, your qualifications, what your theoretical orientation is, that kind of thing.
yeah, theoretical orientation.
Informed consent.
Yes. Informed consent to treat. Yes. Those of you that are in the field, think about the paperwork that you do and all those bulleted items, that you go over. Fees for services. Excellent, guys. You know these. Excuse me. So, like, how long is it before we can enter into a business relationship with a client? Never. 5 years, 10 years, what is it?
5.
Is it 5 now? It used to be 2. Don't confuse that with the sexual relationship.
No, I think the term of the relationship 5 years.
I'm sorry. It is really.
Um, but I stuck with 5.
Just be sure that you review those norms, those professional norms and standards, because it used to be 2 years before you could do anything business wise with a client or friendship wise, and it used to be 5 years for any type of intimate relationship. So, just be aware of those things. Let's see here. Yeah, some basic questions about practice. And it's hard to really go into those without giving them away. I think I've covered the main ones here. Oh, if you have to, I don't know if you covered this, but this is probably one to cover. After you get your license, how many hours do you have to get for continuing education each year? Oh, it stumped everybody. If this one stays on, so we want to, with this is a good review right now, might get an answer. So
is
what?
it 20?
What?
20?
Yes, and what portion of those have to be ethics?
3.
Yep, very good. Nice. 20 and three ethics at least. Good. Read the preamble of the ACA Code of Ethics. Just read that. You don't have to know the ACA Code of Ethics front and back, but kind of know how it's laid out. Let's stop there. I think it's enough. We need to move on. Let's talk about group. Okay. What are some primary concepts from group counseling? Oh man, I taught this. Don't everybody be silent.
The
I feel
stages
bad.
of group.
What's that?
The stages of group.
Yeah, stages of group. Think of Tuckman stages. What else? Be able to recognize them. You know, I go into a little bit more detail when you, so don't just be able to list them. Be able to identify like what's going on in them. I know those off the top of my head. You know, be able to recognize what's going on. And they may have an alternate name, like performing, working, storming, you know, might be conflict stage. What else? What are some things you try to do in group? What are some conditions that you try to create?
Cohesion.
Yeah, excellent, Alex. Cohesion. You really want tight group cohesion. So you try to facilitate this. And you really want people to, let's say your members experience something like, I'm not alone. There are a lot of people experiencing this. What's that called? Experiencing.
Universality.
Oh, you guys remember. Yes, thank you. Okay. They paid attention. Yeah, universality. You know, things like that. Go back. So like one of those weeks I shared like it was like a Yalom page or something like that. Go back and pay attention to some of that. The Tuckman stages, that sheet will help you be able to, you know, go into a little bit of depth. You know, difference between a closed group, open group, what type of communications. You know, do I as a group leader want people using you or we? We all know what it's like, or you're not listening to group right now. What type of language do we really want to promote? There's certain kind of statements we want to promote as a group leader.
I statements.
I statements, yes, yes. Yeah. Very good. People tend to do pretty good in this on this section. I think it has to do with the instructor. I'm just kidding. That's the joke. What's the problem with confidentiality in group?
There is none.
Well,
Well, aside from you can't guarantee it.
right, you can't guarantee it. Yeah. And there may be a situation where you're required to breach confidentiality, and it's not just in cases where there's a threat of harm or child abuse or elderly abuse. There's also another situation where you may be required to breach confidentiality, and it has to do with law.
If you get subpoenaed,
Judge.
A judge's order, a court order. Just an attorney, that's not enough. You still have, I think this is an important distinction, as I've never made this with you guys. With just an attorney, they can compel you to go testify, but you can stand on your rights on the stand and say, or tell that lawyer, I don't have a release. And I can neither confirm or deny that I know anything about this person. And I've had an attorney get really mad at me about that and threaten me, but those are your rights as a professional, and they'll try to push you to violate those rights in some circumstances. So no, as a licensed professional, your ethical codes, your laws and regulations state that you have to keep those records secure unless, this is where the big unless is. Now, if the judge or the, you know, like Judge so-and-so orders you to, you have to. I guess you could always plead like I can't, I need my clients. I don't know. I wouldn't though. That's the one case. So you do have some leeway with a lawyer. With a judge, you really have to break confidentiality. So yeah, under a court order. Thank you. Good. Okay, let's go to human growth. That's good enough for group. There are only like 8 questions. So And there are only like 8 questions for career counseling too. So thinking about human growth, this is a big section. So I'd spend some time because there are a lot of concepts in here. If you are thinking about human growth and development, what are some major theories, major theorists? Think of the stage theorists first.
Erickson's.
Yeah, you could put Erickson. So know Erickson's stage as well. I'd spend some time making mnemonic, trying to understand what's going on in these 8 stages. I know that's a pain, but it will help you on the NCE too. They just always throw in the Erik Erikson questions. Think Piaget. Know Piaget in and out. Piaget's 4 stages. Oh, let me see if I can, pre-operational. Oh, wait, I got to back up. Sensory motor. Pre-operational. Anybody going to help me here?
Concrete.
Nice, thank you. I knew you guys knew this stuff. Concrete operational. 4 more, right? Know the ages they correspond with. Know Piaget stages in and out. Know what the ages, what corresponds, what sort of activities, what sort of cognitive ability. Piaget's really looking at a child as like a little scientist exploring the world. Vygotsky has some different views that sometimes don't always align with Piaget. What are some other, Kohlberg's moral theories, theory of moral development. Carol Gilligan offers a counterpoint to that. Let's see here. So like Vygotsky's, think of zone of proximal learning. Sternberg. Let's see here. Maybe a question or two on ACEs. I wouldn't spend too much time getting out in the weeds. I'd spend and go back through, think about really the primary things that you learn in human growth and development, the bigger theorists, and understand them well. These folks here, and any others that kind of stand. I know I'm going quickly. We need to make sure we get done, but. And any others that come up that are like, no, maybe Freud, or I'm leaving out Freud again. Developmental theories. Okay, let's move into multicultural. There are 3 you know what these are? It's okay. Recognizing one's own attitudes, self-understanding, one's own biases, that's number 1. Being able to recognize those. Those who do the most damage are those who don't know what they don't know. automatically assuming you know about other people. That can be a microaggression or even worse. It can be just flat out racism, genderism, ageism. Knowledge. Actively seeking. Other people and cultures. One more. Starts with an S. Anybody know this one?
I just started multicultural, so I don't know it yet.
Skills. So to be multiculturally competent, skills that apply to people and cultures. So if you're looking at the three components of multicultural competency, you're looking at person's attitudes, that's your understanding your own biases, your self-understanding, your knowledge, you're actively seeking knowledge about other people and cultures, and skills, in session, culture, culturally responsive skills that apply to people and cultures. Those are the components. Those are the multicultural competencies. Be able to really define privilege in depth. Oppression and recognize oppression. Be able to apply the term bracketing, not just the term, be able to practice that and apply what that looks like. What is bracketing? Power differentials. Differentiate diversity and multicultural. Okay. I think there are 9 or 10 questions. I think there are 9 questions that go with the multicultural section.
Dr. Randolph, I have to jump off, but I wanted to let you know I won't be here next week.
Okay. Just when I upload this, please make sure you review where the first portion that you missed.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Take care. Okay, and let's go to everybody's favorite, which is, unless you're going to be a career guidance counselor, I mean, this is traditionally the section that people tend to score the lowest, just because it's like, it's so, the reason this is actually still a thing is because counseling, the American Counseling Association, actually we were like the association originally was school guidance counselors, the Guidance Counselor Association. So it owes its roots to school counseling and career counseling. So name some major theorists that go along with career counseling. Donald.
Holland,
Super.
Super,
Yeah.
John Holland. I can't remember
Yep.
the others.
John Holland. Be able to recognize what Super proposed. What was Holland famous for?
Personality and job type.
Personality matching, right? RIASEC. Know what those components are. Know that well. There are probably 3 or 4 questions on there. On that. Roe was a theorist. What were her primary concerns? Trait and factor. That's with Parson. Donald Crumboltz. Why so many Donalds? I'll just put Crumboltz. Spend some time looking at Crumboltz's theory. Yeah. I think there are 8 questions that deal with career counseling, and it's a smaller section on the NCE as well. Try to find. So I'd really spend a lot of time just on these. Okay. So if you spend quite a bit of time just on these, you should be okay. There are others. And if you go into the NCE, you probably need to spend some time on the others. Okay, did I leave anything out? Did I get to all 8 sections? Anybody keeping track? Let me see. All right, so I went over stats, went over individual, went over ethics, multicultural. So like introduction, so like research, so that one, think about questions that have to do with like reliability, validity, norming. If you were going to use an assessment with a particular group of people, or a particular population, what things would you want to try to consider? I've got over professional orientation with the ethics. Advanced abnormal. Okay, here's a couple of abnormal questions. Excuse me. That's the one I missed. Okay, so what are some things that stand out to you from your abnormal class? Is that good, huh? I heard that's like one of
It's a lot of DSM-5 knowledge.
DSM-5. Okay, DSM knowledge. So, what makes something a disorder, right? It causes what? It's a D word.
Dysfunction.
Yeah. It has to cause dysfunction for it to be a disorder. Every disorder, if it doesn't cause like dysfunction, distress, danger, to the client, it's not going to be a disorder. So there are also models of abnormality. So think like biological model, sociocultural, You could even use like a psychodynamic model, right? People are fixated. Anything else stand out to you from that? I would add one more. Deviance. Sometimes deviance makes a disorder as well. It's really different than society's norms. I would get to know a little bit about just basic indicators of things like depression, anxiety, mania, psychosis. So there are clusters of maybe even PTSD. No, not going into like the depth of oh yeah, you've got to get every criteria in the DSM-5 TR. You're not going to get that question. I wouldn't go into that sort of trouble on this section. I'd be more like trying to understand, because there are some main like classifications of disorders in here, and know some of the primary basic indicators of these major diagnoses that counselors will encounter quite a bit. Maybe even throw like ADHD in there. Okay, so, it's a lot. It's 2 years of learning in an hour and a half, maybe two. We've been going on a while. What are your questions? Okay.
If you were to suggest to take one of the exams, would you choose the 200 or the essay?
So if it were me, just because of the way I test, and I have tested throughout my life, I would choose the 200 questions because I've always done well in those tests. If you do not tend to do well in those tests, and you've kind of prepared mentally the whole time you've been in the program for this, the one thing I will say about the 200 question test is the way that we are going to work with it is if you score under a 70, you need to resit for it. If you score traditionally, because of the way that the multiple choice and essay were combined, and so you get a score on the multiple choice, you get a composite score from all three people on your committee. They look at your essay, we average those scores, and then those two scores are averaged on the multiple choice and the essay. Those are averaged. I will say in my experience that if you score an 80 or above on both of those things, I've not had people, you passed. If you score under an 80, there is a chance in the oral that you successfully defend, in that your committee asks you some questions about probably some weaker areas, or you're able to kind of talk about things that you didn't explain well, and pass. If a person scores really low, and by really low I mean like 60 or so, that person probably needs to resit. And the reason being is because people traditionally have scored about 10 points higher, 10 percentage points higher on this than they do on the NCE. The NCE, the way that it's delivered, it's 200 questions. They off the top threw out 40. 40 of those were test questions that were determined through item analysis to be invalid for measuring that cohort. So they'll take, a cohort, a group of people that are testing at the same time with the same format. they'll throw those out. So they'll take your score out of 160. I've seen people pass with anywhere from like an 89 to a 97 on that, which is, if you look at it, it's around 60%, maybe a little bit lower in some cases. So if you score a 60% on us, you're probably not going to pass the NCE, which means we need to do some work to help. And that's really what this is for. It's to help you be prepared when you're done to take the next step. The object of your committee is to assist you to get where you need to be professionally. That's really the object of you selecting a committee to grade your essays. It's to help you get to where you need to be professionally to be successful. I will say this: if somebody comes out with something really concerning, I mean, at the end of the day, it is our job also, if it looks like somebody's going to cause harm to their clients, that's a thing, but that's typically not, at this point in the game, it's typically you just showing, hey, here's the knowledge I got in the program. Okay, other questions?
Professor Randolph,
Yeah.
do you have like a couple of minutes after class? I gotta ask you a couple of things.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the record.